Well, actually, I'm the last person between you and the coffee, so I won't take that long. I just took my notes because this is a presentation which has been done by my colleagues at ICR about the studies they've done a couple of months ago, back in 2018. Where it is. Oops. Yeah, so I'll go quite quickly because we already touched almost all of the subjects. Just as an introduction, so the idea is to get you through a study that has been done. So in 2018, the first one was in 2015 for the COP21. The idea is to see how the climate change will impact property damages in the future. So the first study, as I mentioned this morning, was based on the scenario called RCP 4.5, which is a kind of a mean scenario, meaning that the greenhouse gas emission will reduce by the end of 21st century. The second scenario, which is called RCP 8.5, is the worst case scenario, or we can also call that business as usual, because the greenhouse gas emission will follow the same pace than today. So based on this, the idea is also to assess the dynamic change of the population in France and to see also the impact on the property damages. So I'll go quite quickly because I think I have like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Time enough? Okay. So this is the main steps to go through the study. Actually, this is done in partnership with Météo France. Météo France is a weather forecast agency, a national weather forecast agency, and actually they have their own model, which is called the ARPEJ. And thanks to this model, we have managed to generate like 400 potential years at climate, actual climate, current climate, and 400 potential years at 2050 climate. So thanks to those results, we put them in our own model in order to try to determine the hazard evolution and also the damage evolution in France. Another important thing to take into account for this study is the fact that we need to assess the vulnerability. So the vulnerability, well, it's not an easy one actually to do, and we had to work with data from the INSEE, which is the French National Institute for Statistical and Economic Studies, and based on 3 scenarios, low, medium, and high. So I won't go into deep details on this one, but the idea is to say that vulnerability won't be homogeneous over the territory. As you can see in blue, there is a decrease in the number of risk evolutions, whereas on the west side of France, definitely we can see an increase. So this is also mainly driven by the fact that a lot of the population is moving to west part of France right now, and it's going to be even worse by 2050. So to also give you an idea of the amount we're talking about, as of today, we consider that the insured values is more or less 40 billion euros, 1/4. Whereas based on a trend scenario, we consider that for 2050, the increase of insured values should go up to nearly 30 billion euros. So this one is based on the trend scenario. Nevertheless, we consider that this can be offset by the level of premium that will be collected, and therefore we decided to take another scenario, which is actually based on the evolution of the number of risks in the future, as well as their location by 2050. So the insured values should go down to 15 billion, 1/5. So in terms of impact, what does it mean? I mean, definitely we can see an increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. And this is, as you can see, more or less more in Brittany or northern part of France. And in terms of, how can I say that, evolution for the 70-hour rainfall accumulation, on a 50-year basis, 50-year return period basis, variation is, you know, kind of important because it could go up to 16%, and mainly, I don't know if you can, mainly around Paris. And this is where you have the most insured value in France. So with regards to floods, what is interesting also is that we are able, thanks to this work, to create some charts, some maps, where we are able to identify the runoff and the overflow following floods. And another interesting story is the fact that definitely we can see an extension of the inundated lands in France, and this is, as I said earlier, mainly in northern part of France and western part of France. So definitely more frequent events and larger risks are coming from ahead of us. So in terms of, because we are here also to talk about money, in terms of amount and damages, what does it mean? So as of today, we are about on an average annual losses, let's say around less than 700 million. We know that by 2050, with the only impact of climate change will go up to 38%. And this can double if we take into account the inflation, but that's very difficult to assess, this one. So that's, we have, how can I say that, kind of uncertainty level which is quite high to assess the level of inflation and its impact. So over France, you can see that, as I said earlier, this is still the northern part of France and west part of France, which is highly impacted. And obviously, this is not homogeneous because we can have figures below 25% over there. Well, what is important to see on this one is the fact that the climate change by itself doesn't change a lot about its impact. It's only a maximum of 3%. What is definitely having an impact to the evolution of hazard is the sea level rise. And this is definitely what will impact France in the future, and it can go up to 15% on this one. So just to illustrate it, in blue, this is the climate change only by 2050, and in yellow, this is adding to that climate change the sea level rise. So still in terms of money, what does it mean? While the increase is kind of important because it can go up to 82% in an average annual losses, but definitely that the sea level rise that has a big impact compared to the climate change only. I don't take the figure, but this is 43 million euros. And so it kind of double if you add the sea level rise. So in terms of vulnerability, as I said, is mainly driven by the fact that people are moving in a risky area, and but on this one, actually the impact is quite modest compared to the sea level rise. So for drought, I won't spend that much time either. Definitely there is an impact, and it's we are facing severe events in the future, and it's mainly obviously in summer and autumn. Nothing that much to say about that. Well, I mean, this is of interest for agriculture, obviously, and that's something that we'll have to work on for the future because, and this is part of the conclusion, but I can say a word on it. We will have also to use this study to see how we can improve, to prevent risky behaviors in France and anti-selections. So in terms of damages, hazard only, as it is mentioned, represents only 23%. Inflation is definitely something difficult to assess, but we feel like it will double the numbers. And while every part of France will be obviously impacted, so compared to floods, this is, let's say, maybe more pessimistic. Globally speaking, so this is actually the most interesting part of it, we know that climate change will significantly impact the country. It's mainly due because of hazard, plus 35%, but also because of inflation. And as I said, this part is very, very difficult to assess. We try to work with data coming from the French National Institute for Statistical and Economic Studies. But in the end, this is definitely the big unknown. But we feel like this should be compensated by the offset of premium. So we know that that's something that we'll have to work on it for the next one. So that's just 4 bullet points to see how we can translate it and give you thought for thought. We know that definitely we'll have to make our society more resilient to large events because we know that we are going to face bigger events in the future. That means that risk management is definitely more efficient when we are talking about let's say private and public partnerships. So I do agree with Alejandro from CCS to say that that's maybe the solution for the future, to have this kind of partnership, public and private. And we mentioned this morning the ILS world, and I'm pretty sure that this is the ILS world which will help us to fill the insurance gap in the future. So, and as we mentioned also, this is a world based on modeling mainly. So modeling data will be kind of a gold asset in the future, because you won't manage to attract investors if you are not able to show them that your modeling is more or less accurate. So as I said, we know that we will face big events in the future, and in this regard, we need to make sure that we will not have any risky behaviors. When I mean risky behaviors, this is like, as we have done in France in the past, unfortunately, to have a lot of house by the sea. And that's something that we cannot afford anymore. And especially if you consider that the sea level in France should go up by 20 centimeters at an horizon of 2050. So that's a lot. And as a final word, definitely adaptation. This is something that has been mentioned this morning, I guess. This is, Luc, you said that. Adaptation will help us to reduce the burden of a loss in the future. So that's the conclusion. While you have seen the figures, 35% will be the impact in France. What is definitely interesting is to note that it is very difficult to predict the future. And to do this exercise for the 2018 study, we did not take into account protection measures, as it was mentioned by Laurent this morning, neither local urbanism scheme, neither erosion issues. And that's something that we will need to address in the future to make sure that our studies will give us a better picture of the risk, and in order also to make sure that we will be able to link with all the parties in order to reinforce, obviously, the solidarity and the mutuality, but mainly the prevention policies that are needed to make sure that we will be able to face, without much damages, the future events.